You've just signed a lease on your rental property. Everything seems perfect, but then your tenant disappears, stops paying rent, and leaves the place a disaster. You try reaching out, but it's like they've fallen off the face of the earth, pulled a Patrick Swayze, gone ghost on you. Sounds like a nightmare, right? Well, for some landlords, this is their reality. And today we're going to be taking a look at a bunch of tenant horror stories that I found on TikTok. From damaged properties to non-rent payment and everything in between, these videos might make you second guess becoming a landlord. While that's not my intention with this video, it is important to be aware of the risks you take when renting out your property. I'm Nate Friesen. I'm a registered real estate agent in Ontario, Canada, so trust me, I know exactly how terrifying these situations can be. After we watch these videos, I'm going to be sharing tips on how to protect yourself and avoid falling into these traps. So grab a seat, hit that like button, and let's dive into the nightmare fuel.
So here we are. Here is what we walked into. Just a side note, when we bought this property, the previous landlord just signed him on with a year lease, and with that in mind, we did not want to put him in the street just because we were purchasing as much as we wanted to redo the property. The property was intact. We did do inspections. However, it didn't look anything like this. Any and all issues that he did have that the landlord before us didn't take care of, we immediately took care of it after we finished closing. Turns out he was pretty much beating up his wife left and right, which, as you can see, all the holes, and the kids were clearly not taken care of. Complete disregard for the property. After multiple interactions with him to start cleaning up once it started getting like this, but nothing went through.
So it sounds like they bought the property with this tenant currently in it, which is a common occurrence in investors. If you have tenanted properties that you're trying to sell and you're an investor trying to buy a rental property, sometimes you have to assume those tenancies when you're purchasing it. You can't just kick them out unless you're going to be living in the property yourself, at least in Ontario, Canada anyway. Kind of hard to avoid it in that instance. When you're buying a tenanted property, you do take risks. You weren't the one who did the background check on the client, so you don't really know who you're assuming. You kind of have to go based off of what the previous landlord says about them, which can be a little tricky sometimes, and you have to have a certain level of trust there because you could wind up in a situation like this. Depending on your state or province's regulations regarding landlords and tenancy, you could ask for character references just to try and get an idea of who you're going to be renting out your property to. But that's about one of the only ways I could see avoiding a situation like this, where someone's going to be obviously anger issues and abuse and that kind of thing and taking it out on the property. Doesn't seem like it was a great situation, which is unfortunate for the people that were living there. So a big thing is to document everything. Before a tenant even steps through the door, make sure you're taking extensive photos of every square inch of your property so that you have proof of what the condition it was in when the tenant walked in the door. Take pictures, take videos, even of all the imperfections in the property that they're going to be assuming. That's your best defense in a situation like this, where you can kind of go after them and make a claim against the tenants for damages to the property that you are now going to be responsible for their actions. And like I said before, depending on your state or province's regulations on landlords and tenants, so whether that's calling the employer, asking them some questions about their, work attendance. Typically, if they have a good work ethic and they're showing up every day on time and they don't have any sort of infractions, that the boss can tell you about or their manager can tell you about, that's a good indication. It's a green flag. And we're all about the green flags when looking for tenants. And calling their past landlord. If they have a past landlord that they put down in the application, make sure you give them a call. They'll be able to tell you why they're leaving, what condition they left the property in, if they ever had any occurrences with them or issues whatsoever. They'll be the ones to tell you exactly the blunt truth. And like I said, if you're able to, ask for character references as well. Speak to people who know them. Try and dig a little bit to see if you can figure out a bit of their character and, what they might be like and how they might treat your property. A solid tenant history can be worth its weight in gold in this situation, because while not all tenants are like this, and there are plenty who treat the property with pride as if it was their own home and they look after it and take care of it, there are the bad tenants out there who will end up with situations like this where there's holes in the walls and the doors, dirt everywhere. I've been in properties where they let the kids color all over the walls in crayons and markers. There were dings everywhere in all the drywall. it was just a disaster. Or they stained the carpet all over the place. So yeah, those are a few of the biggest tips I have for screening tenants to try and avoid situations like this where they're really going to damage your property. Document everything. I feel like that's your biggest defense, or your best defense, sorry, in this situation, because then you can prove what condition the property was in before they took possession of it, if you need to make a claim against them. And then one final tip is make sure that expectations are set up front when the contract is signed. So where available in your lease agreement, document what is and isn't allowed that is enforceable under the Landlord-Tenant Act in your local jurisdiction. On to the next.
Tenant moved out owing for month's rent.
So yeah, that one definitely, like I said previously, I've been through properties where they let the kids draw on the walls. Definitely was the case at this property here. There was marker or crayon or whatever it was all over the walls, junk all over the floor. Like, that is so unfortunate that they just treat it. And when they leave it like this, it kind of makes me wonder how they lived like when they were in the property as well. Like, did they live in a junk filled place like this with garbage all over the floor, or did they just do that despite the landlord? I don't know the situation surrounding it, if there was an eviction or anything like that, but man, that's rough. And you can even see at a certain point in the video where they patched drywall that there was obviously a hole in it, but they didn't do a good job. They just patched it. They didn't really do a good job sanding it and blending it into the existing drywall there. Couch was overturned. They just left their furniture, or maybe it was pre-furnished. I don't know. Carpet was grimy and terrible. Yeah, that was not a pretty sight to see. And as a landlord, you don't want to walk into your property and see that when the previous tenants move out. As it stated in the video, they moved out owing 4 months rent, which that's awful and that's hard, because then you have to carry that payment, as well as if you have your own mortgage, you're carrying 2 mortgages now, making the payments, and that can really strain you financially depending on where you are in your investment portfolio. It can really have an effect on you. So like, my biggest tip for that, again, going back to the previous comments, contact previous landlord. If they put it on the lease agreement or their application, contact the previous landlord so that you can talk to them and find out why they left their property, if they ever had any delinquencies with rent. That's a good thing, but more than likely, if they did have delinquencies on rent, or they left the last landlord with a bad taste in their mouth, they're probably not going to put them on the application. So either do some more digging or get your real estate agent to do some more digging to find out what their previous living arrangement was before the application on this property, just to try and suss out if there was any sort of past conflicts with a previous landlord. That's going to be a key thing to do when you're doing the investigation process. Enforcing automatic rent payments is a good idea if it's a legal right for you as a landlord in your province, state, whatever. If you're able to enforce automatic payments, then I would do that. That's a good way to mitigate the risk of a missed payment or multiple missed payments, or just being without rent for as long as it takes to evict the tenants. In Ontario, you can't enforce one specific rent method, so you can ask for it, but you can't enforce it. The payment method has to be agreed upon by both parties. So you could ask, for instance, like I said, if you can't enforce automatic rent payments through direct withdrawal, then maybe ask in the application, or get the real estate agent to ask for post-dated checks for the entire year, obviously along with first and last, but ask for post-dated checks for the entire year. That way you can have some assurance that hopefully they're not going to cancel the check or anything like that, but you can have some assurance that you have rent set aside for the entire year. You're not going to be without getting a check for rent. But again, in Ontario, you can enforce some specific method like that. But if it is an option for you, it's definitely a good idea so that you're not missing out on multiple rent payments or having a lot of late rent payments as well. And if there is a late rent payment, make sure to communicate that immediately. Don't leave it. Don't, oh, well, maybe it'll come in tomorrow or the next day or whatever. If you have a set date for rent payment in the contract, then make sure you contact them if it's not in by that day. A friendly reminder can go a long way. But if this is a routine occurrence, having that paper trail is going to be key when you go and do need to escalate things. You'll have documentation that you have reached out on multiple different occasions, not just he said, she said. And if you're a new landlord or, you just haven't brushed up on the latest legislation, make sure you know the rules and regulations in your state or province. That way you know your rights regarding evictions and that kind of thing, because it's super important. You don't want to get in a situation like this and then be stuck without options. In Ontario, tenants do have a lot of rights. If you ask a landlord, they have more rights than a landlord, honestly. And it's very hard to enforce an eviction. It's not the same process as in the States. So make sure you know your local province, states, regulations and laws regarding landlords, tenants, and evictions.
So this video just shows you why it's important to know who's renting your property. Had to go help a mutual friend clean up after evicting his addicted tenants. And this footage is all 12 hours after the initial clean. And as you can see, there's still a lot more to be done here. So avoid thousands of dollars of damage to your property and know who's renting from you, because this is going to be a long process.
So he said it in the video, that is going to be the best option to avoid a situation like that, where it sounds like they rented to some addicts, unfortunately, who obviously very much mistreated the property and lived in a very unsanitary and unhygienic state. And it's a lot of work now for them to clean that property up and get it ready. So that's time that they have to put into cleaning the property up, fixing it up, and getting it ready so that they can rent it out again. So that's money lost, time lost, and money that you're going to have to put out of your own pocket for not only repairs, but also for the mortgage, because bills still need to be paid whether you've got tenants or not, right? So that really sets you back as a landlord. So figuring out, if at all possible, in most situations it's best to rent to someone that either you know or someone who knows someone that you know. That way there's some level of connection there. That way you can have a better idea of who you're going to be renting to. Not always possible, understandable, because there are plenty of tenants out there, plenty of people looking for homes, and you're not always going to know the person that you rent to. But finding out as much information about them as you can before just signing a lease because you got an application, you want to make sure that you've done your due diligence. Definitely don't just sign the first offer that comes in, because you do need to do a lot of digging and finding out more about the tenants. If at all possible, have a meeting with them face to face as well. See if you can if they'll agree to meeting you, and that way you can just sit down, have a chat with them to get a better idea and maybe even a gut feeling about who you're going to be renting to. And honestly, if they don't want to meet you, that's a bit of a red flag there as well, because what are they trying to hide? What are they trying to avoid, right? I understand you don't want your landlord as a tenant. You don't want your landlord in your business all the time. You want to be able to live in your property with peace. But having at least that initial conversation with them before your tenancy starts is a good thing to protect you as a landlord, and for them to get to know you as well and know who they're renting from. And same thing goes both ways. Build that relationship so that you know who you're renting from or who you're renting to. After watching those videos, I think we can all agree that managing rental properties isn't all sunshine and rainbows, but there are definitely precautions you can take to mitigate the risks of these nightmare situations. So again, my top takeaways and tips from this video: make sure to thoroughly vet your tenants before signing anything. Background checks, employment verification, and past landlord references are a must. Document everything. That is the most important thing that you can do to protect yourself. Before they move in, take photos of everything, videos of everything. That way you have documentation should they cause damage to your property and you need to pursue legal repercussions against them. That's going to be your best defense. Be clear with your expectations. Set expectations up front regarding rent, pets, noise, property maintenance, etc. That way everything is written is the most important thing, because that's going to be the enforceable fact if you do need to pursue anything legally. So make sure that all expectations are set out, written in the contract and in the lease. And then most importantly, which I think that both tenants and landlords should know your local laws in your province or state regarding landlord and tenancy. It's important to know your rights and what actions you can take if there is any issues that occur. That way you're not caught off guard start if issues arise. Well, I hope these tips help you avoid your own tenant nightmares. If you've ever had a crazy tenant story, drop it in the comments below. I think we're all interested. That way we can all learn from each other and how to avoid situations like these. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more real estate tips and reactions. Until next time.